The Beasts of Daniel. In this prophecy study, we will look at Daniel chapters 7 and 8. In the last study, we saw Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a great image, representing the kingdoms of the world, and we saw Daniel's interpretation. God gave Daniel a series of dreams that give even more information about these empires. In chapter 7, Daniel sees a series of beasts. Chapter 7, verse 4. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a human mind was also given to it. This winged lion represented the Babylonian Empire. Later in the book of Daniel, we will see Nebuchadnezzar being called the basest of men, and he actually went insane for 7 years. Upon his return to sanity, he glorified God and had what we would call a human heart. Verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much flesh. We know from history that Persia took over the Babylonian Empire, so we know this to be the Persian bear. Persia ruled from 536 to 326 BC. The reason it was raised up on one side is that in the Median Persian Empire, Persia was more powerful than the Medes. The reason it had 3 ribs in its teeth is because Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt tried to form a coalition against Persia, but failed. Persia devoured up them and became the world kingdom. Verse 6. After this I kept looking, and behold another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. This represents the Grecian kingdom, headed by Alexander the Great. As soon as Alexander took over, his kingdom was divided into 4 separate pieces. Today these regions would be called Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. Once the breakup occurs, Israel will be tossed back and forth between Syria and Egypt until the time of the Roman Empire. Verse 7. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth, and it devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This beast represents the Roman Empire. Notice its iron teeth compared to Nebuchadnezzar's vision of the iron legs. The Roman Empire was dissolved officially in 476 AD, but as we know from the other prophecies, later, in the future, part of what used to be the Roman Empire will revive in the form of 10 nations. That's what these 10 horns represent. Verse 8. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. Later prophecy studies will confirm this, but we're talking about the Antichrist in the midst of these 10 future nations. Notice here in the chart, we see Nebuchadnezzar's image of the gold head, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet and toes of clay. As it had been interpreted by Daniel, the head of gold was Babylon, the chest and arms were of silver, Medo-Persia, belly and thighs of brass were Greece, the legs of iron were Rome, which divided before it was dissolved, and later on it would re-emerge in the form of 10 toes, or 10 separate kingdoms. In the days of those kingdoms, the Messiah would set up a millennial reign. Compare these to Daniel's visions. The winged lion that had a heart represented Nebuchadnezzar, which was Babylon. The bear, Medo-Persia, with one side higher than the other, meaning the Persians were stronger than the Medes. The belly and the thighs of brass correspond to the 4-headed, 4-winged leopard, which was the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great, which then broke up into the 4 smaller empires. The iron legs were Rome, corresponding to what's called the nondescript beast, or the beast that Daniel does not describe, both of which end in 10 toes and 10 horns, symbolizing a revived Roman Empire in the last days. During the time of these kings, the Antichrist will reign, the tribulation will occur, and then the second coming will occur. The small horn in the midst of the 10 is the Antichrist rising to power. In chapter 8, Daniel has another dream of a ram and a goat. Starting in verse 3, he says, "Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram, which had 2 horns, was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last." The symbolism now is getting clearer. The ram was the national symbol for Persia. The fact that it had one horn longer than the other represents that the Persians were stronger than the Medes in the Medo-Persian Empire. Verse 4, "I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. But he did as he pleased, and magnified himself." Verse 5, "While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west, over the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes." Verse 6, "And he came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him with mighty wrath." Verse 7, "I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him. And he struck the ram, and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him down to the ground, and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power." The ram represented the Persian Empire that grew west, north, and south, and eventually attacked Greece. The goat is the national symbol for Greece. Many years later, Alexander the Great would form an empire that would take over the Persian Empire. Alexander took the Persian Empire over in 326 BC. Alexander himself, as the angel will tell us later, is represented by the single horn on the goat. Verse 8, "Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven." This represents as soon as Alexander took over the known world, his kingdom split when he died into 4 pieces. His 4 generals took control of each province. Anciently, they were called Macedonia, which is Greece proper; Thrace, which is now called Turkey; Seleucus created the Seleucid Empire, which now is referred to as Syria; and Ptolemy created the Ptolemaic Empire, which was in Egypt. Syria and Egypt will be the major problems for Israel in the later chapters. Verse 9, "Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land." This again shows us that the Antichrist will rise up in the midst of the 10 nations, and will come from one of these ancient kingdoms, which were part of what would be the Roman Empire. Looking at the chart, we can see that the head of gold and the winged lion represent the kingdom of Babylon, from 607 to 537 BC. The 2 arms of silver, the bear with one side higher, and the ram with one horn longer represent the Medo-Persian Empire. The belly and thighs of brass, the 4-headed leopard, and the single-horned goat that becomes the 4-horned goat represents the Grecian Empire, splitting into the 4 smaller empires that exist until Rome, which is the 2 legs of iron and the nondescript beast. In the later days there will be the 10 horns or 10 toes that are the revived Roman Empire. Please visit us at BibleFacts.org or wordofprophecy.net to get the next in the series of these prophecy studies, in which we will see Daniel 11 gives a detailed analysis of all the kings and wars ranging from 536 BC all the way to 1948 AD.